All right, so you all have been asking me to do a video about the infamous Carlito. So in this video, I will be talking about, his career. And you all, I must warn you all, I'm very saddened because as I did try to do my research on Carlito to get information about him, things that you all may not have known. I was so sad because unlike a lot of his peers who I have done videos on, like Shorty J, Remy Mars, Trap Boy, there were no think pieces done on him. There were no blogs or anything. So that made me very sad because I feel like he was just as much of a star as they were. But I'm going to dive into the reasons of why I don't feel like he shined as bright as they did. So let's talk about it. But before we talk about it, I need for you all to stop, screenshot this screen, and go follow me on my other platforms. I'm warning you all, I will not be posting on Facebook that often anymore. So you need to be following my platforms like TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. So screenshot this screen and blow it up so that you can go follow me. Because again, if you want to continue watching my content, these are the platforms that I'll be posting it on. I don't want you all to miss out. So there you have it. Carlito got his start in the black gay adult film industry in 2006 when he was around 19 years of age, and he worked tirelessly to make a name for himself up until around 2014, 2015. And in about 7-8 years that he worked, he is credited with doing 83 scenes. And it could be more, but that's just how many he's credited with doing. Now, as I was saying earlier, there isn't a lot of think pieces that are done on Carlito. And like I said, that breaks my heart. But I do feel honored to be one of the first to actually, talk about, his nostalgic days and, give him his flowers because he deserved his flowers just like Remy Mars, Shorty J, all the rest of them. But I'm going to be honest with you all. When we think about Carlito, let's call a spade a spade. I'm going to draw a circle, right? This is a circle. This circle represents 100% of people that watched, black gay adult films, from the 2010s, right? I think out of the 100% of that circle, 10%, I think a small 10% of that circle were diehard Carlito fans. I don't think, if you're thinking about the whole picture, the whole circle, I don't think a lot of people checked for Carlito the way they checked for, his peers, his co-stars. And I'm going to tell you my first reason for why I feel that way. I feel like a lot of Carlito's peers in that era I feel like it was very hard to shine in that era because there was a lot of heavy hitters from that era. Like I said, when you think about that era, Breon, Drilla, Venom, Knight, it was so many heavy hitters that, when the scene was supposed to be about Carlito have had several DVDs, that he was the star of these DVDs. They were named after Carlito. But let's call a spade, you all. I feel like a lot of his peers outshined him in his own scenes. I felt like, I feel like Carlito should have been paired with newcomers. I feel like if he were paired with a lot of newcomers, if they wanted him to be the breakout star, you don't pair a person like Carlito who does, okay, while Carlito is a sexy boy, let's start there. Carlito is sexy. He's very attractive, but I don't think Carlito had a lot of sex appeal. Not as much as his co-stars did. Not as much as his peers did. So if you're going to pair a man of his caliber, if you want him to be the breakout star and you want him to star in a scene, you had to have paired him with a newcomer. That's just my opinion. I feel like he should have been paired with newcomers, and I think Carlito would have stood out. I think he would have been a rising star. The problem was in that era, they were pairing him with a lot of heavy hitters, and they were stealing the scene. And this next scene that I'm about to talk to you all about, one of my favorite scene of the 2010s. I would say that to this day, I still watch that scene and I get my life from it, if you get my drift. But Carlito did a scene with Romance and Night. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to try to keep it clean. But in this scene, when I tell you all, first, because they were taking turns on Carlito. He was the bottom in this scene. But, first, with Knight, he got to get. I remember at one point, Knight kind of pushed Romance out the way because Romance was in the way. He kind of pushed Romance out the way because he was really, getting it in with Carlito. And, he finished. He climaxed, inside of Carlito. Well, I guess, this must have lit a fire in Romance when he saw this, because right after that happened, he got on top of Carlito and proceeded to, finish with Carlito. So, try to keep it clean, but I'm just telling you all, that scene is one of the hottest, freakiest scenes that I had ever freaking known in the 2010s, and it's one of my favorite to this day. Anytime that happened over 10 years ago and we still talk about it, you know that it's a hot scene. And drop in the comment section, what is y'all favorite hot scene with Carlito? And you all remember when I did that video about XL and I said that the industry had coined him the term king of versatile adult film? That really made me feel away. I never told you all that in that video because I felt like that video was me giving XL his flowers. But I felt very offended by that title, and I'm going to tell you why. I felt like if we were going to give anybody the title of King of Verse, black gay film, then that title should have went to the infamous Carlito. That should have went to Venom. That could have even went to, hell, Remy Mars. But I felt like, how dare them give XL the title of King of Verse when Carlito was a fully verse dude? Carlito had a lot of scenes where he topped. He had a lot of scenes where he bottomed. And I feel like he came way before XL. So to sit there and give that title to XL, that really aggravated me. I feel like if we're going to pay homage to Carlito, let's start there. We're going to start with the fact that Carlito was verse for most of his career. So I just felt a way about that. Drop in the comment section, do you all agree with that? So you all, while I feel like Carlito had so much swag, I feel like, Carlito was a cute boy to look at, and we enjoyed watching him. As I said, I just don't feel like he stole the show. And I do think that he came out in an era where, like I said, there were so many heavy hitters. And I'm going to be honest with you, when you think about Carlito, do you think about, being intimate with him? Or do you think about going out and having a beer with him or hanging out with him? Carlito, he had swag. He was very relatable. He seemed like the type of person you would want to be cool with. You know what I'm saying? Like play video games with or whatever. But I personally don't think a lot of people looked at Carlito and thought about going to bed with him. I could be wrong, but like I said, I feel like Carlito, he was a star. He did what he was supposed to do in his scenes, which were helped to make them memorable, but I just don't feel like he shined. And unfortunately, I don't think that's why he get as much publicity as his co-stars do. Now, I know this sounds redundant, like a lot of videos that I've done of his peers from the era, but he did disappear after 2015. And I'll tell you all briefly why. I do feel like, remember how Rico Pruitt, the stars of today like Rico Pruitt, Arquez, Cash De Niro, do you remember how they came to us, how we came to know them? Well, they slickly did it. They got them started on these web series. Now, you have to remember, we didn't have a lot of black gay representation during that time. We had Noah's Ark briefly. They took that from us, and, for years, we didn't have a lot of black gay representation. So they finally gave us some black representation, something that we could enjoy, something that belonged to us, which was these, web series like Lit, about him, about Justin, and, those films or whatever. And a lot of those stars eventually, graduated to doing adult film content. And that's why after a while, when Rico Pruitt and Cash De Niro, when they started doing porn, you start thinking, Remy Mars who? Carlito? Trap Boy who? You just forgot about them, and you all, it's being said that, after he left, like a lot of his peers, in later years, you know, Carlito suffered addiction. You know, he would start up, you know, social media page, but he would rant on it a lot, would really aggravate a lot of people. They just got, you know, exhausted hearing him rant, and people either deleted him or he would just delete the social media altogether. So really sad ending to, you know, another legend from that era. So drop in the comment section, what was y'all favorite, you know, scene with Carlito? Can he make a comeback to OnlyFans? And, you know, how do y'all feel about Carlito?